Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please take your seats, we will get started. Fighters for human rights, ladies and gentlemen, the task and the honor extended to me by the Human Rights Foundation is to introduce a leader for human rights and the rule of law, President Emil Constantinescu, who played a major role in the development of democratic culture in his country. Romania had suffered from fascist dictatorship, war, Soviet conquest, and since 1947, one-party communist rule. That rule was exercised after 1967 by one man, Nicolae Ceausescu, who styled himself the great conductor and the genius of the Carpathians. He organized an efficient and ruthless police state at home and promoted alliances with ruthless dictatorships abroad, such as Kim Il-sung, the self-styled maximum leader of the North Korean dictatorship, who inspired Ceausescu's regime of systematization, under which all aspects of life in Romania were to be systematized to suit the vision of the great conductor. Ceausescu even managed to fool many abroad that his policies were independent of the Soviet Union, that he was different, despite the evidence of the failure of his regime to provide even simple foodstuffs, and at the same time developing a cult of personality, of grandiosity at the expense of all else. The Ceausescu family and their retainers maintained firm control until things began to crack in late 1989, partly in response to the wave of unrest sweeping the Soviet Empire and its satellites. I remember those days very vividly. I was living in Vienna, Austria at the time, where I worked with Austrian liberals and other European liberals to smuggle books, photocopiers, fax machines, and even paper into the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, something that we continue to do with the Atlas Economic Research Foundation. With friends from Hungary and Austria, we organized protests at the Romanian embassy, donated food, money, and blood to help the suffering people of Romania. In January of 1990, I flew to Bucharest to organize training programs for Romanian lawyers, judges, students, and professors on human rights and the institutions of civil society. The fragility of the dictatorship became apparent finally even to the dictator himself, who in other cases seemed honestly to think that people loved him. One consequence of not allowing free and democratic discussion is that in the end, sometimes even the dictators themselves are fooled by their own propaganda. I'd like to introduce a speech, the last public speech given by Ceausescu, and you will realize the fragility of the police state he had done.
Doresc de asemenea să adresez mulțumiri inițiatorilor și organizatorilor acestei mari manifestări populare din București, considerând aceasta ca o
was organized by his own regime, it did not turn out as planned, and the genius of the Carpathians fled on a helicopter the next day. Many people took part in the rallies and the marches and the manifestations of popular discontent that followed and that contributed to that enormous change. Among them, Professor Emil Constantinescu, who was in the public square with his students. He's a modest man who insists he was no hero, just one of many Romanians who found the courage to demand the end to tyranny. But he did know that removing a dictator may be one thing, but creating the rule of law is another. A free society doesn't just happen when you remove a dictator. It's not an easy matter to build up the institutions of constitutional democracy, democratic elections, independent judiciary, the institutions of property, exchange, free association that allow us to realize our liberty. Romania was fortunate to have people who were willing to work to build those institutions. Emil Constantinescu started his public career in 1960 as a judge, but because the law then was a tool of repression rather than of freedom, he switched to the study of geology, became a leading researcher and professor. After taking part in the Romanian Revolution, he became president of the University of Bucharest and was deeply involved in NGO activities and civil society. He ran for president in 1992, forcing Ion Iliescu, who had taken over after Ceausescu, into a second round, and then ran again in 1996 when he was elected president and sworn in as president of the Romanian Republic on November 29. Among his main contributions to his country was promoting respect for human rights under the rule of law. So it is a pleasure and an honor to introduce to you Emil Constantinescu.